Hello, this is Elizabeth, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart: how I manifested my American dream. So, writing is a discipline, it is a consistent effort towards what you want to build. So, how did I write my book, and how did I do it while teaching at the same time? So, an interesting fun fact about me is that I am a super scholar. I'm the result of a Catholic education, and the most expensive thing on me is my mind, followed by my stomach. So, I grew up in a wonderful Catholic community. I was at St. Ephraim's, then I was at Mount St. Joseph's Academy. I got really cool ideas about this book. I kept it in a series of notebooks that I have. I have two whole Tupperware boxes of every notebook, every journal that I had about the concept for Thea's Tapestry. And it was the early 90s and 2000s, so I had all these cringy false attempts of manga and anime in there, and it really was cringy, but it was beautiful, and I didn't know any better, and that's what made it so much fun. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna create manga. I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna create books and novels. And that's when the reality of balancing my first world job came with building the second world dream. So an interesting thing to note is I studied at Loyola University. I got there on a scholarship. So I studied English literature, and then I got a minor in secondary education, which, by the way, the minor was a minor on basically a minor on steroids. I would call it a major within itself. I was teaching in Baltimore County, I was teaching in Baltimore City, and I was tutoring and working with kids mainly from Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Sudan during that time period. I also worked with students for Honduras and El Salvador. I got really into working with the El Salvadorian community in Baltimore, and that's why I got a lot of my inspiration for Esperanza's character. So her El Salvadorian heritage really ties into it, and that's my little homage to that period of my life. So after graduating from Loyola University, I got very excited to immediately start teaching, but the only problem is there was a hypersaturation of education in the market. So what happened is I wasn't able to get a job with my teaching license in Maryland, and I work in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is the golden pass for licenses. So my Maryland license didn't double count for Pennsylvania. It didn't have reciprocity. So as a result, I had to take the practice exam. Then after doing that, I finally did it. I got my PA license. They have Instruction 1 and Instruction 2. So for Instruction 1, in order for your teaching license to be valid in Pennsylvania, you have to have it where you have 6 observations, 3 consecutive years, and overall 3 letters of good character and recommendation. If you don't get that within the 5-year time limit, your license becomes invalid and doesn't transfer into license 2. So you're racing against the clock, which is pretty insane. So the other conundrum that I bumped into was student loan debt. So I went to Loyola University on a scholarship. So when I walked out with $38,000, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that much, but I'm that person who grew up with an immigrant background. I am vehemently against having debt, so I poured all my energy into knocking that out. I lived on cold brew, I lived on protein bars. I had to immediately go back with my parents because I did not have the financial capital to start out on my own. I have never rented or owned an apartment. I immediately went back home to support my family and myself. So once I started on the grind, I thought, okay, I have my praxis, I have my Instruction 1. How hard is it to get a job in Pennsylvania public schools? The only way I got a job was when someone was injured or pregnant, and that sounds ridiculous, so bear with me. You have it when you start out, you get a long-term sub position, and basically that's an excuse for them to keep the contract open for the teacher who's been there since the 1980s, 1990s. The person is pregnant, they take off maternity leave, I'm there for 3 months, they cut me out, they cut off my health insurance, then I go back, I'm on the grind, then boom, they put me back in, someone got a heart attack, I'm there for 2 or 3 months, boom, you're on the grind, then behold, you get out again, and then someone has a cochlear implant combined with a hip replacement. So basically, I could and can do everything. So I've taught 7th grade from 12th grade. So my certification is from 6th grade to 12th grade in the state of Pennsylvania. I have taught in multiple school districts all throughout Bucks County, but none of them had a contract. So what was happening during the time period where I graduated was the Great Recession, in which employers were scaling back. So they had no interest in hiring new teachers without experience when they already had teachers in the wings. So the only way you got a job was with being a long-term sub, but as soon as your assignment was gone, you were ricocheted from place to place. And because the health insurance was so unstable, I didn't sign up for it immediately with it, and it became a very difficult process. So I did what any young millennial does, get 2 jobs and work at a coffee shop. So I worked at Starbucks back in the day, and this is the pre-COVID days. So this is before it became the kind of mechanical drive-by, get your mocha frappuccino abomination machine that it is today. I worked at a hole-in-the-wall shop, and I got the benefits of the 401k, the health benefits, and I also had the watering hole of the town's shenanigans. So I had a lot of clout and influence and lots of fun conversation with folks there. So I worked during the day as a teacher, then I worked at night at Starbucks, and it was interesting that they offered a meal and multiple drinks in the bar, which is both terrifying and fantastic at the same time. So case in point, I have $38,000 in debt. As I'm working, I'm taking every single paycheck and hitting my debt on the back end. So I created a game out of it. So I used the snowball technique. I took my debt and I broke it up into 1,000 little boxes on a notepad, and I knocked them out, and each paycheck I did it and worked my way through. I finally got to the point where I was able to have some financial stability, and then lo and behold, the plague happened. So the one thing that was consistent, the one thing that kept me going, was writing my series. So when I graduated college during the Great Recession and no one was hiring me, I knew it was that moment. So that June, I printed out the entire manuscript. I started, at the time, the original Red Thread was 115 pages. It's actually the 3rd arc that is going to be in the final copy. And I loved it. It was cringy, it was weird, it was fantastical, and it was a reflection of me at that time, and I hold it with the millennial optimism that was deep in my heart. Looking back on it, it's absolute garbage, but it was my absolute garbage, and it gave me hope. I sent it to the publishers. It got absolutely destroyed, but I used that to build myself up. I used the comments, the editing, and I went back and I rebuilt the first 2 arcs. So the first book ended up being 415 pages. This is what kept me sane during that incredibly unstable period of my life, knocking out debts. So my entire 20s was spent knocking out debts and building this. And this is the first book. So Red Thread is 415 pages. The second book I wrote, and I was a barista at the time. I still had building subbing positions. I was not a long-term even in that. So I would just be chucked into random classrooms. And what really gave me hope is every paycheck, I would get my meal in the bar. I'd be hyped up on white mocha and 4 shots of espresso. Absolutely lethal. Absolutely wonderful. And then I'd have my laptop. I'd be typing away. It was one of those old laptops with like the DVD in it. Oh, I'm so dating myself. But anyway, so I would go and I would create scenes for my sketchbooks, and I'd write them out with Sharpie, and I'd type it up as if it was a script. And at my prime, I was able to write 20 pages a day. So the first book, I was still world building, I was conceptualizing my ideas and thoughts, and I can't edit what's not there. So I went for it and threw it all out there and edited as much as I could. And I loved it. The second one, I knew what I was doing. The plot was more linear. It had less jumping back and forth between the different locations in the world, between the Void and the Red Thread. The second book, White Thread, primarily takes place in the land of veterans and suicides. And that was me deep diving research into the Vietnam War, the Cambodian genocide, and looking into the long-term implications and effects of PTSD. So I did research in addition to going into the jazz speakeasy societies of both 1937, 1938 Berlin, and the exploration of Philly's jazz scene as well. So I went to work, I took attendance, I did my best, I put resumes together, I applied to all the jobs, and I just kept having the same thing, saying you're not qualified enough, thus you can't take over these classes. I kept waiting for my day to come. I would go to work, mop the floors, make coffees, and I'd write. And the second book took me 7 to 8 months to write, and that book ended up being 443 pages. So that one is ready to go. So after Red Thread, I poured out my soul and made that one. And the third book was the Blue Thread, which is primarily takes place in the Blue Domain, and it ties all the events together. And that one wraps around to the beginning. So it was me doing a deep exploration of what it felt like to be burned out. Because at that point I was working 40 to 50 hour weeks. I look back at my notebooks and the amount of stamina that I poured into my works. And I really started exploring to what does it mean to sacrifice for your dream, and what does it mean to work hard towards something without being able to see the end game in sight. And are you okay with accomplishing your goal without seeing progress, or do you need to tangibly see your progress in front of you? So writing, sending it in, I had a small writing group that I worked with that I sent through Messenger on Facebook, and honestly, it gave me so much hope. I couldn't control everything in my life, but I was able to control how much I could attack my debt and how much I was able to work towards my novels. So the third book is now 632 pages. I will break it down considerably, and I will have them inside story vignettes and mini novels away from the main plot. However, that's when my wheels started changing, and the wheel of fate worked to my advantage in my career. So at that point, when all these things were happening, I completed 3 books. And in my head, I felt like an absolute success. But at this point, I was also getting towards the latter year of my 20s. And I sat to myself and thought, like, did I truly spend all these years doing something that I loved? Or did I do it in the pursuit of a dream that was never going to come to pass? And to be honest, I don't regret anything. It was an absolute joy to write. It feels like a triumph to actually have the opportunity to publish it. So with all that in mind, there was a teacher who unfortunately unexpectedly was injured. They needed an English teacher right away. I went to that school district and they liked my performance at the middle school. They asked me to work at the high school, but it was a series of long terms. But the long-term sub positions were scotch taped together, so I had consistent income coming in. So as a result, my attention was focused on my roster of 250 kids versus my book. So part of me, I printed them all out at Staples. I had these big giant binders, and I looked at them, and my students who I would teach English to would be surprised and like, oh, you write novels? Well, why aren't they published yet? And I sat there and I said, oh, eventually that day will come. And I knew it would come. And then, unfortunately, the plague happened, right? So I was teaching classes virtually. I was going back and forth. And then I realized when I did the math with it, I was able to pay off my student loans in full. So I logged on to the Sallie Mae site. I punched it in the one last time, and I successfully paid off my student loans in a 4 to 5 year range after college. And without that tremendous weight pulling me down, I realized I could use that money. So I put it in 401ks, I did investments, I did that all throughout my 20s. They've grown immensely. I've put it in the Pennsylvania Teacher Retirement Fund. I have Vanguard. So all of my financial needs have been put into play passively. So now it's making space for me to do what I want. I followed a lot about minimalism. I learned about the FIRE movement primarily through a lot of different YouTubers. And I really expanded what I knew. I did reading challenges where I strengthened my mind, where I tried to read 100 books within a year, and I gave myself a little treat once I got it. The first item that I had bought myself, because I lived so minimalistically, was a Nintendo Switch. And I remember when I got it and it was out of fashion 5 years ago, but I didn't care. And that was the first item that I bought for myself, and it felt wonderful. And then the other thing that I thought was amazing too was after I did that, I paid my car off in full. And last year, I was very blessed to qualify to buy a house. So currently, I'm sitting in the office of a room that my now fiance and I bought together. And it's a little house, but it's a sturdy house. And I remember sitting there on the floor of the living room, and there's no furniture at all. And I just laughed and I smiled to myself and I thought, it was worth it. Everything that I had worked for. We finally had a place of our own. I was never able to rent, so I never had a place of my own. And now I have my little office and my mini library that now I get to work from and share parts of myself. And I got to the point where I wanted to advance more in my career. I decided to get my master's degree, and then I pursued additional education through professional development through Laverne University, and then I got my master's of educational development through the program that they had at Wilkes University. So I did that while I was teaching at the same time. So I put my dreams of being a writer, a novelist on the back burner while I focused on doing a 5-year program. I did it in under a year. So now I hit this stage in my life where in public school, the turn of the tide has changed with the advent of AI. They're actually going the opposite route where they want the teacher with the least amount of experience because they can justify paying them less. So as a result, I was too expensive now I'm overqualified to teach in the public school circuit, which is honestly a bit concerning to me on a global and socioeconomic level. However, I feel like it was a sign that it was time for me to either advance either as an educator or advance as a novelist. So I decided to switch gears and I went to a nonprofit private school where currently I'm able to have customization and design control of the curriculum. We've done entire units based on the Great Migration with Great Gatsby and Neil Larson's passing. We've worked on the mystery and horror genre, and now we're going to dive into Shakespeare, and I feel a calm and a sense of peace that I haven't felt in years. And then it dawned upon me that what did I want after I graduated my master's degree program? So we decided to rescue a dog. We have a dog, Sadie Lady, and we got Betty Boop. So we rescued her, and I felt very fulfilled. And then I realized there was one dream that needed to be fulfilled. And I sat there and I decided, I think it's time to publish my novels. So I decided to put myself out there. I applied to 5 publishers, and here I am now talking on a private vlog about the discipline it takes to write a 400-page compact lore odyssey while working a full-time teaching job. And I think the moral of the story is when you are a writer, a lot of people like the aesthetics of being a writer, being a musician, being a content creator. But the reality is it's not only a state of being, it's an action. It's a thing that you continuously do. It's something that consumes you, but satisfies you. And for me, I think being interconnected to stories, being interconnected to literature, as a teacher and then as a writer, and showing the next generation how to express themselves and connect themselves to people beyond their time and comprehension, and really give themselves peace of mind when they immerse themselves in a book, is the greatest mission that my life could have right now. So I'm very blessed in many ways. I have a wonderful partner. I have a wonderful house, a little house that I own. I have 2 little rescue dogs. And now I have the opportunity to fulfill a childhood dream of mine, which was to publish my book series. And I knocked out my student loan debt in order to free myself up, to give myself not only financial freedom, but the freedom to live and do life on my own terms. So I get to be a teacher and teach the new generation, and I get to tell stories that will last hopefully throughout time. So I'm very blessed in that way. And that is my journey. Discipline and consistency counts.